Welcome back, everybody, for part 2 of our first round of presentations. We are joined now by Julie Potapinski, who has done some incredible work with the Indigenous community and is going to discuss her research project on the Indigenous Peoples Court, which is quite amazing, Julie, and I'm so excited to hear about it. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to the presentation this morning. My name is Julie Potapinski, and I'm a fourth-year forensic science student at Trent University. I completed the Indigenous Peoples Court project with Nathan Baker of the Peterborough Indigenous Peoples Court Committee. In Peterborough, community members, lawyers, judges, and Indigenous members have worked together to create the Peterborough Indigenous Peoples Court Committee in hopes to open an IPC in the near future. The purpose of my research for the Peterborough IPC Committee is to determine the most effective methods that are being used in IPCs in Ontario and across the world. I was also enlisted to develop an evaluative tool that would be used to assess the success of the Peterborough IPC. Unfortunately, the time limit of this project did not allow me to do that. So an Indigenous Peoples Court is an alternative sentencing court that introduces methods that cater to the Indigenous offender and community. These types of in-court methods and alternative sentencing options allow for a more effective justice system for the Indigenous people in Canada. The main reason IPCs were created was to combat the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the justice system. Indigenous people have faced racial discrimination in Canada for hundreds of years. This type of treatment has led to Indigenous people living through unavoidable circumstances such as social exclusion, poverty, and substance abuse. These types of factors, which are also known as Gladue factors, make the Indigenous person more likely to commit crimes and be introduced to the justice system. So therefore, the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the justice system is directly correlated to the racial discrimination and colonialism that they have lived through. If you pay attention to the chart on the side of my poster, you can see that the overall population of Canada is only 5% Indigenous, whereas the incarcerated population that is Indigenous is over 30%. And this statistic is also represented in the youth incarcerated population as well. To overcome the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the justice system, IPCs use a variety of alternative methods in the courtroom and sentencing processes to make the courtroom more comfortable for Indigenous members and also to show the respect we have for their culture. The alternative methods used in sentencing courts that I investigated were the sentencing circle, praying or smudging before and after court, the use of Gladue reports and caseworkers, and the presence and input from elders. In order to complete my research, I conducted a literature review that focused on material published in the last 20 years from New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. I chose this type of material because those were the first countries to implement IPCs. New Zealand and Australia also have an Indigenous overrepresentation crisis as well that the Canadian issue can be compared to. Therefore, I think using methods that work in New Zealand and Australia can be effective here in Canada as well. I next conducted 4 interviews, and these interviews were with an Indigenous Friendship Centre worker from Thunder Bay, a justice from Ottawa, an Aboriginal legal service worker from Toronto, and a criminal defense lawyer from Brampton. These 4 individuals provided my research with differing professional and geographical backgrounds. Interview questions ranged from the participants' background professionally and personally, the methods that they see in their area and in their court, and the opinions on what works and what doesn't in an IPC. One quote from an interview that I wanted to highlight here was that the main goal of an IPC is to break down barriers between Indigenous people and the Canadian government and work together to create a unified system. During my research, I had several kind of aha moments that led to some major findings. The first and most important is that methods vary in IPCs and that this flexible nature is what allows them to work so well across the world. The methods used in each IPC should be generated based on what the community needs and that specific community in the area. So for example, the Inuit Indigenous population in Ottawa might require different methods than what Peterborough will require. Second is that the sentencing circle and the use of elders are the most widely used methods worldwide, and that the use of the Gladue report workers is most useful in Ontario. These 3 methods were heavily cited and spoken about by the participants in the project. And lastly, it became very clear that the IPC sentencing process is extremely time-consuming. When the rehabilitation of the offender is key, this process takes longer and more monitoring of the offender is necessary. Finally, after developing some key points out of the literature review and interviews, I was able to make some well-backed-up recommendations for the Peterborough IPC Committee. Peterborough should seek the advice and inclusion of elders in their court. This will ensure that the Indigenous communities in the Peterborough region are having their specific needs met. With this advice from elders, Peterborough's court will be flexible and cater to what will successfully rehabilitate the offender and please the community. Peterborough should undoubtedly employ Gladue caseworkers. Since this method is most widely used in Ontario, Peterborough should use it right from their startup. And finally, the increase in time, money, and resources that an IPC in Peterborough will require will be large. Therefore, the Peterborough IPC should be prepared for this increase before it opens to ensure their own success. And that's all my research, and I would like to answer some questions.
Wow, that is amazing. What incredible work you are doing. And I just, something that I really picked up on, and I love that you've included it in your presentation, is your aha moments. And so I do want to touch on those specific moments in a bit more detail, but I guess my question would be, I can imagine you had maybe another aha moment when you first decided to do this kind of research. So just what was your inspiration, or how did you make a decision? What led you to do this particular type of research?
Well, I have always been interested in law. And like I said at the beginning, I'm a forensic science student, and law was my kind of backup if I didn't like forensic science. So when this project was kind of proposed, I knew that I would love it. And since I've been researching or studying law for a few years, I recognize that there are a lot of issues in our system, and I think it is extremely important to start fixing them and recognize what we're doing wrong and what we have done wrong in the past, and kind of work to fix that and become one unified system.
Yes, very good. There's obviously, and you touched on this, can you talk about sort of the challenges that you faced with coming and maybe getting information from people or being able to meet with the individuals they met with? Did you come across any sort of barriers or blocks there?
Yeah, so I only got to interview 4 people. If I had all the time and resources in the world, I would have loved to interview everyone in Ontario. But obviously I couldn't do that. And people in the justice system are extremely busy. And sometimes talking to a university student isn't on their most to-do list. So re-emailing people and kind of bugging them and asking, can you please talk to me, was one of my biggest struggles. And I think if it was like one email, can we talk? And they said yes, it would have been so much easier and I would have been able to get so much more information. But of course, they're so busy and have so much more important things to do. Not more important things, but
lots of priorities, yeah, and lots of challenges on that end too. But and you've just sort of touched on like where you could go from here. I feel like, Julie, you could hire a whole staff of individuals who do work for you, who can get conversations with these important people. So we have our first question from our audience. This is amazing. Your research is so important, and I just want to lift it up to say, I'm going to butcher this, but it is a beautiful Indigenous word. So intrigued about this eventual evaluation tool for effectiveness, especially from the perspective of Indigenous folks connected to the justice system. I've learned a lot from you already. Beautiful.
That's so nice.
It's so lovely. I wonder if you could talk about the links between early incarceration of Indigenous people for things like practicing our ceremonies, gathering together, hunting on our family hunting grounds, etc., and current incarceration practices and overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the justice system.
Sure. So I never researched a lot about the early incarceration practices, but I know that the overrepresentation, like I said, it's directly related to those types of things of, residential schools and kind of trying to snuff out their culture and their languages and their practices. And that has it might have affected someone's ancestors and not exactly affected them as much today, but that kind of treatment has been passed down from generation to generation for hundreds of years for these people. And we can't just say like, oh, it happened in the past, it doesn't matter to you, because that's not true. And that's not, it's not affecting them, and it will affect them forever. And I think that has led to the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the system, and we need to address that and admit it and work to fix it.
You know, and it's so well documented, the ripple effect of residential school systems and this intergenerational trauma. It is really, you know, it's quite a stain on our Canadian, you know, system and whatnot. But I think you answered that question beautifully. I think you're absolutely bang on.
Thank you.
So we do have another question. Why is this important to present your work at the TCRC Celebration of Research? And what does it mean to you as a student and a researcher to be able to present?
So when making my poster, I felt like, oh my gosh, there's so many words on it, but I still have so much to say. And I feel like I just worked so hard and did so many great things this past year, and I really wanted the opportunity to portray that. And when I heard of this opportunity, I volunteered, and I'm very passionate about what I've done, and I don't want my project to end in April. So I wanted to take every chance I could get to present. And I think being passionate about the work you're researching is probably the most important thing, because if you don't like it, then you're not gonna enjoy doing it. And I can like firmly say I've enjoyed every aspect of this project and everyone I've come in contact with. And I would love to keep working on something like this if I had the chance.
Oh, well, I think we have, I'm myself included, and we have lots of viewers, close to 70 individuals that are probably rooting you on and saying, yes, Julie, go. You know, keep going with this research because it is so incredibly important. We're going to, I think we have one more question coming in here. I think that's it for today. Julie, thank you so much for your time. And thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. So this concludes our first round of student presentations, and we will reconvene here at 11 o'clock to hear Aaron and Rachel working with public health about vaccines readiness. And Julie, thank you very much. And any attendees with any further questions, please do put that in the TCRC email, and we will absolutely put you in touch with Julie to get back to you. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks all. Have fun browsing the booths, and we'll see you at 11. Cheers. Bye-bye.